With that, I'll turn to Senator Scott.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson, and I want to thank Chairman Johnson for taking all the heat for hosting a hearing like this. I think it's the right thing to do to get people to feel comfortable that our elections are free and fair, and if this one wasn't, that the next one will be. You know, this is 2 years ago I got elected. I won election night by 54,000 votes. And Chuck Schumer sent a lawyer down and basically said, I don't care what the votes are, we're going to win through the courts. And we went through unbelievable number of lawsuits. We had, I think, something like 1,000 lawyers working with us. We went through 2 recounts. And he didn't care what the votes are. Chuck Schumer's goal was to win, and his lawyer was just to win through the courts. It didn't matter what the votes are. It didn't let me come to orientation. And so when I watch this stuff now, I did not remember one Democrat in this entire country say, that's not right. You shouldn't be doing it that way. They were all in on this, and nobody complained. So we've got to figure out how to do this where people feel comfortable. I can tell you, I live in Naples, Florida. Every time I go out, people come up to me and they're frustrated with the unfairness of the system. Now, of course, these are people that wanted Trump to win. They think that he lost unfairly, but they're mad. They're mad that because they hear about what happened in Wisconsin, they hear about what happened in other states, and then they're furious that they think the whole system's rigged. So one thing I did is in September, I put out a bill called the Voter ID. We do absentee ballots, and it actually works in Florida. You have to be a registered voter. Your signatures have to match. You have to get your vote in, ask for your vote early. You have to get your vote in on time. It's your problem if you don't. It's not somebody else's. You don't get to vote after the fact. Your vote doesn't get to come in after the fact and somebody count it. Although 2 years ago, the Democrat lawyer tried to do that. And we know that we get the votes out on time. We did it this time. So it seems to me that if we want people to feel comfortable in this country that these elections are fair, you have to show your ID. You can't be doing same-day registration, because how can you tell if somebody is legal, illegal? I mean, how would you know? Do they live in that state? How would you know? You got to let people be able to watch ballots being opened. We had 2 election supervisors that were removed because of what they did in my election. And they were clear. They completely violated the law, and they found and tried to count 95,000 ballots after election night. Not in my favor, of course, in the Democrats' favor. So Judge Starr, what do you think about the need to have local elections? Because I think what Mr. Krebs said is right. One of the reasons why we have good systems here is we don't have a national system. We have a local system. But should we have national standards? Should you have to have ID? Should your signatures have to match? Should you have to you can't get registered on the same day that you vote. All the things that we have, like we do in Florida, where you have to get your ballots early and all these things, and you know how many. By the way, you're supposed to announce how many ballots you have that night. You should know, right? They did in my election. And that's how they kept finding it. So, Judge Starr, what do you think about this idea that we have to have some national standards but still have local elections?
I think national standards need to be seriously considered in light of these recurring issues. We all have anecdotes. One of my friends, an academic leader in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where I used to live, here's an anecdote. One of his students, a registered voter in Vermont, but she's studying in Virginia, and she receives appropriately an absentee ballot from Vermont, but she receives 4 unsolicited ballots from the Commonwealth of Virginia, where she happens to not be registered to vote, but she's studying. And everyone is hearing these anecdotes, and they're saying, well, aren't there control mechanisms in place? And so the issue of decentralization is you will continue to have these varieties and vagaries unless and until there is some enormous reforms in state government, or in Congress using its powers under Article 2, under Article 1 in this particular instance, says we need to step in and have regulations to ensure integrity. And a signature requirement is one of the bases. I like to say, Senator Scott, you've got to show ID if you want to check into a hotel or get through some TSA security. So don't we want to have those kinds of safeguards just to ensure, yes, this is going to be an honest election, which I think is all we are all asking for.
So, Mr. Troupis and Mr. Banal, if we had done some of these things and they'd been enforced in your states, would people feel comfortable that there was a fair election?
Senator Scott, I think it would absolutely go miles to make sure that people were confident in the results of the election if we put in simple methods to make sure that the people who vote are who they purport to be, that one person only gets one vote, that the way that the ballots are counted leads to an accurate total. These things shouldn't be partisan. These things should be exactly what we do to protect our republic and make it so that people know that the results are accurate. Because otherwise, you end up where we are today.
Senator, one of the fascinating things about Wisconsin is, as I said, we have a long history of real transparency in our process, in our recount process, in all of our processes. So it's particularly odd here. And several of the justices on our court this last week called what the Democrats had done in the majority of the court, in the Supreme Court, as absurd and bizarre. And the reason they referred to it that way is they said, the issue here is what confidence do people have in the election process? So if that's what we hear, and I've heard that, I've been hearing that all day here, confidence in the election process, well then why, when everything is teed up? I mean, you know, I'm a former judge. My co-counsel is a former president of the state bar. We had teed up everything. We absolutely, you knew the names, addresses, wards. You had exact records. And what the Biden campaign did not want the court to do is to actually address the substantive question. That's the holding of the court. We won't address the substantive question. And the Chief Justice, I mean, it's a great frustration in the Chief Justice when she said, 4 members of this court throw the cloak of laches over numerous problems that will be repeated again and again until this court has the courage to correct them. Candidly, it was all Democrat talking points. I mean, they did make the same thing. I heard something about Justice Karofsky's comment. It was just a talking point. And I guess the frustration you hear from those of us who are serious lawyers, who have taken this seriously, is that when we pose these matters to courts, we expect them to address them. When they don't, it undermines the integrity of our system. That's what's going on here. The frustration that you hear, even in good Democrat circles, is if the courts don't address these, who's going to? Aren't they the ultimate arbiters? There's no dispute that the election would have turned out differently in Wisconsin if, according to our allegations and according to our proofs, the court accepted those, that the election result would be different. But instead of addressing the substantive claims, the Biden campaign argues, don't talk about them. Don't address them. And that's why I thanked Senator Johnson when he first called and asked if I would talk, because if you don't inquire here in the Senate, and as Ken Starr said a minute ago, if you don't do this inquiry, there really isn't going to be any analysis, and there isn't going to be an opportunity to get the very integrity that we all want. I mean, as I said, as a former judge, you know, this is a serious matter to me, and no one suggested at any point in the process that the allegations in Wisconsin are anything but serious and substantive and documented. And yet a court takes the Biden line and says, we're just not going to talk about it. And that's just wrong, and that's the reason, one of the reasons, people don't trust this outcome.
Yeah. In Florida, we have a lot of people that moved from South America. And so a lot of them have said to me, how is this different than what Maduro's doing, right? So, I mean, and part of it is, people don't have enough information, but it's so simplistic when you hear about people that are dead that are vote, people that don't live in the state to vote, and you hear all these things, and there's no recourse. So we've got to figure this out. We got to be able to prevent this from, I don't know if anything will happen with this election, but clearly we can't let this go on for the next election.
Certainly.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Scott. And I